Hello, and welcome back to the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joseph Arthur, PMW's multimedia editor. We've got an editorial-only episode of the show this week because some big news broke late last month that we thought warranted an in-depth discussion. So on today's episode, I'm joined by PMW's premium content editor, Jyoti Rambhai, to discuss Google not only walking back third-party cookie deprecation, but also scrapping the potential for a user choice feature that had been billed as a bit of an alternative to the initial deprecation in Chrome that it had planned. It looks as if, for the foreseeable future at least, cookies are going to remain on the shelf as they have been in the past. So that was a big 180 from what was promised. It was a surprise to some, less of a surprise to others. Nonetheless, it was big news with big ramifications. And I think perhaps the most surprising thing about it was the time this news broke, because there's a lot going on in the world at the moment and a lot going on for Google, particularly with its ongoing trials in the US with the Department of Justice. So Jyoti and I get into all things Google, cookies, industry reaction, what to do on this episode of the show. So it's time to sit down, take a deep breath, and dive in to this episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. Jyoti Rambhai, hello and welcome back to the Performance Marketing Unlocked studio. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. It's been a nice week. Congratulations on completing the marathon.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, I've been recovering this week. We did 42.2k around London on Sunday and had to work from home on Monday, admittedly. Legs are in pieces, but we made it through. We got a PB. We raised a ton of money for the British Red Cross, which is cool. But yeah, it was maybe, even for me, a little bit too hot. It was very warm in London on Sunday, and it's been very warm this week, which I've enjoyed. But for the run, it was almost too much, even for me.
Yeah, but you still did a pretty good time. I mean, that's quite impressive.
Oh, well, yeah, don't want to brag. It was under 3 hours for anyone listening and runs. You can gauge for yourself whether you're impressed or not. But are you enjoying the sunshine? We were saying off air, you get a little bit and ahhing about
yeah,
hot
so
weather.
I don't mind it. Right now, it's an okay temperature, but when it gets too warm, I'm like, no, just put me in somewhere with some AC.
My theory with Brits is they love to complain regardless of the weather. Winter's too cold and too dark, and summer's too hot and too warm and too bright. And there's maybe a middle ground of a week in April and a week in October where it's all firing okay for everyone.
Yes, Brits love to, one, talk about the weather, and two, complain about the weather. That's nothing new, but personally, I do prefer the cold. You can wrap up warm, you can keep yourself warm, like, get a hot water bottle or something, but
Get cozy.
But
everyone loves the word cozy.
And it's easy to keep yourself warm, whereas it's harder to cool yourself down.
Yeah.
And then
it's an interesting theory. All I'll say is the podcast is sort of inadvertently, every episode we do a weather watch at the beginning of it, and I think that speaks to the guests primarily being British, although not always. Anyway, we're here today for a bit of an extended editorial app because there's been a ton of news this month, or last month.
Just this week, actually.
A very big bit of news broke, perhaps the biggest news on the year, and that was Google has walked back not only its third-party cookie deprecation plans, which it did last year, but the user choice alternative it was planning to implement has been scrapped as well too. And so third-party cookies are going to remain on Chrome as they currently are, at least for the foreseeable future, which is not what they've said they were going to do since pretty much 2020. So it's been nearly half a decade of umming and ahhing on the cookie front. It looks like we're not really going to get much change at the end of the day.
I mean, it's a massive 360 U-turn. I wouldn't say we're right back to where we started, say like in 2019, but it is a big backward step. And I don't think they've done that lightly.
Yes, we'll get into why we think this pivot might have occurred in just a moment, but I'm not all that surprised. I think at some point they weren't very forthright with what the user choice feature was going to be. The sandbox didn't quite work the way they had intended when they first went to deprecate cookies. And it's just slowly been paring back what was promised and delay after delay. So am I surprised that there's been another halt to another chapter in the cookie fiasco? No. But like you said, this is a complete 180 from what they said they were going to do. So I'm very surprised at the news that we got last week. And the industry was abuzz with it. It certainly caught a lot of people off guard as well. They snuck it in under the radar among a lot of other news going on.
Yeah, and do you know what? That's what surprised me, because I'm like you. To me, it didn't come as a surprise, this news. And someone used quite a nice phrase. Google's been flip-flopping with their cookies and the deprecation of it for 5 years now. So yeah, I wasn't as surprised, but yeah, it really did catch some people off guard.
It certainly came at an interesting time. But let's get into the who, what, why, and how of the whole piece, because there's a lot to digest. But best place to start is, what do we think has prompted Google's pivot away from what was promised? This latest iteration of it. Why now? Why did the news come when it did?
I think this has a lot to do with what's happening in the wider or the bigger picture for Google. So I've been speaking to a few people in the industry, and with the antitrust trial that Google's going through in the US, so there are a number of trials. So there's one that's suggesting that it sells Chrome. There's another one that's going on over its search dominance, and there's another one over its ad servers. And all of this is, one of the key themes is, Google is a monopoly. We need to do something about it.
We're breaking up the big ad tech, specifically Google, and its monopoly across advertising and search. And
one of the key themes in all of these trials is, we need to break this up. But obviously Google is appealing those decisions, but there is a chance that it might have to sell off one of its products.
Specifically Chrome.
Chrome, potentially. And if it is, then it's most likely not wanting to continue investing in it. It's probably just getting it ready to make a sale, if that's what it comes down to.
It's a very hot take. So it was ruled a monopolist by the US Department of Justice. Google is appealing that decision, but there have been some very serious threats of Google potentially having to sell off Chrome. Now, there's obviously geographical implications to all of this as well, because this is a US-based trial. But obviously, if they sold off Chrome, I'm not quite sure what it would look like in the US versus Europe and APAC, because it's a global resource. But your contention there, and that's some industry scuttlebutt you've heard, is they're basically going to potentially start focusing on making Chrome ready for sale, as opposed to continuing to invest billions of dollars into improving it.
So I think, and this is just this week, Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai, I think that's how you pronounce his name, took the stand at one of the remedies for the company's antitrust trial, and he said that they've spent billions on Chrome, right, making it what it is today. And if you think about the market share of Chrome as a browser, like globally, it's something like 65%, maybe more, maybe less.
It's the dominant one, that's for certain.
Yeah. So it could have some real implications, and part of it is they don't obviously want to sell their IP or have people sell their data that's associated with it as well, because that's a big thing as well.
Regardless of the why this has happened now, and obviously we won't really know what's going to happen with Chrome until those appeals are sorted out in the US, which could still be quite some time. Things like that don't move at a rapid rate.
We could be talking years still.
Exactly. So what about advertisers? What should they be doing in the wake of this news, specifically with regard to first-party data, which we've been told is a priority and needs to be a priority, but the impending deprecation and even the user choice feature to some extent was used as a big reason for urgency when it comes to a transition away from third-party cookies towards first-party data. Is that all scrapped now? Do we not need to worry? We can keep cashing in on third-party cookies, or is it still a priority?
No, I think for advertisers, they should still be looking at cookieless solutions. We're in a data privacy first world, and if you think about your average consumer, most people nowadays, when they get that cookie prompt, will reject cookies. And I think that's only going to get more common. I do that myself. And so the data that's available in terms of third-party cookies and tracking to target is only going to diminish. So actually, you want to have first-party data, or you want to have solutions where you've partnered with data providers that can help you with another solution that can help you target your consumers and your customers.
To play devil's advocate, which I love to do, there was a lot of talk when the initial deprecation happened on Chrome about the bulk of the industry being underprepared for a total deprecation. This was about 18 months ago when they did that initial little pool of advertisers. And the reaction from the industry was pretty negative to the deprecation. It was like when GDPR came into moved in Europe. But the thing is, everyone says they want first-party data and they're going to invest in cookieless solutions because it's better for personalization and they get more valuable insights and it's better for user privacy, which all of these organizations claim to care about. But similarly to when GDPR came in, people still aren't adhering to it, by the way. GDPR is finding a lot of these big tech platforms all the time are failing to adhere to those regulations. It's the same. I think it's saying one thing and doing another. The industry, it isn't always as upfront and clear about things. And I think there's a lot of people saying, oh, first-party data, it's great. It's such a good idea. It's a win-win for everyone. But when it comes to actually investing, particularly in this current economic climate, both domestically and abroad, it's a big ask. And I mean, the fact that Google's deprecation was sort of used as a factor to try and move things along with a sense of urgency tells you everything you need to know. People aren't just jumping aboard to cookieless solutions.
Okay, there is a lot of talk.
Hypocrisy. Yeah, some are.
Action.
Don't get me wrong. Some are out there investing outside of walled gardens and the open internet, but many aren't.
I think with anything new, it's a massive industry. For getting like advertising is huge. I think there is a lot of talk, but change happens actually at a much slower rate. So we can talk about all of this. We can comment on what Google's decisions. We can talk about what the industry should be doing, and with people that are, I guess, maybe pioneers, like trying to move that needle. But yeah, change always happens at a much slower pace, and it's almost frustrating sometimes when you hear the same conversations or you're having the same conversations that we were, say, a year ago.
Well, you think about the consumers now and the implications of this decision. What does it mean for consumer and data privacy going forward?
To be fair, from a consumer perspective, I don't think anything's really changing.
But we're very tapped-in consumers when it comes to cookie preferences. We're very hyper-aware of them. Do you think the average consumer understands the difference between a third-party and a first-party cookie?
I don't think they do.
Because they've just got to be prompted when they go to a website, you either allow or you don't allow cookies.
And you naturally will go reject.
Yeah, but they're not going to specify whether cookies are first or third party.
They're probably not even going to read what it is.
No. So, and I think some consumers, like you and I, because we're a little bit more aware of these things, will reject cookies. But I'll accept cookies from websites that I trust because I know that the benefit of doing that is I'll get some personalized advertising. But if it's a website where I don't trust that it's using good first-party data, I'll reject those cookies straight away. I don't know that your average consumer is going to delineate between the two. So to me, this rings of there's going to be a lot of bad personalization going forward.
I think you always are going to get the good players and the bad players. There's always going to be the ones that are looking for the quick route, the quick gains, and that's probably where you'll see that. And just sort of to throw in the mix there when you were saying about your average consumer. You're forgetting that some of the publishers now have also got this accept cookies or pay model as well. And I think...
Which seems more Machiavellian than I initially thought to me.
Yeah, but it seems... I don't know. It's still early stages, but it seems to be working.
It does seem to be working, but to me that's a good example of accept cookies or... go away, pretty much. We're not interested unless you're accepting cookies and we can collect your data.
The other way is to pay if you want to remain anonymous.
Yeah, sure. But it boils down to everyone is struggling to hit their bottom line, and that's what's motivating people's decision making. And the pay to play feature when it comes to cookies on publishers, it's a very innovative thing to do. But again, I just think at the end of the day, the consumer's going to lose out somewhat. Just because these people that they can still use third-party cookies and they're going to be held less accountable than they were if things deprecated. Personalization probably will suffer a little bit because the need and the necessity to invest in first-party solutions isn't there as much if the rest of the broader competition isn't doing it. I suppose the case for first-party data is if you do invest in it, it's a great opportunity to separate yourself from the pack. That would certainly be the case being made from those outside of the walled gardens. You think the idealist solutions, the likes of the trade desks, I imagine they're probably pretty happy with this news.
Yeah, but I think the bigger brands, the bigger advertisers will probably already have already set a path to do this, right? It's maybe the smaller advertisers or ones with the minimal margins, that given any sort of volatility in the economy and uncertainty, the first thing people do is scale back their marketing budgets and they hold off any investments. And anything they do goes naturally towards the performance channels, which they know can guarantee them return on investment, return on ad spend. So, and that's where you'll probably find those ones where they've got smaller margins, they don't know what's happening, and they'll be a bit more risk averse going back to using cookies, I think.
They're going to be squeezed somehow.
Yeah.
Now, I want to throw a couple of thoughts at you from the broader industry. We've canvassed the industry. There's been several reaction pieces across the website now, but there's a couple that just sprung to mind. I'd like to get your thoughts. This one comes from Jamie Barnard, good friend of PMW. He's the CEO and co-founder of Compliant. He said, for a company that holds most of the cards, has Google just played its Joker? Is this a play for leverage to stop Chrome being the price it pays for monopolizing the game for so long? Given the years of flip-flopping, it's hard not to see the timing as a tricksy little sleight of hand. He went on and said a little bit more, but that couple of phrases there, that rings very true of the point you asserted earlier, Jyoti, of maybe this is their play to try and weasel their way out of some of the trouble that's coming with Chrome.
Yeah.
And the potential to sell it off.
I think so. Maybe that's... He's just hinting at that's maybe what's happening here. We can't say for certain what the decision behind them scrapping all of this is, but bear in mind like I said earlier, they've made billions of dollars of investment in their Privacy Sandbox, in deprecating cookies in their Chrome browsers.
The Privacy Sandbox is a very interesting point of this discussion because what happens to it now that cookies are staying on the shelf in that sense? Because the Privacy Sandbox was being introduced by Google and billed by Google and advertised by them as, here's your new solution to third-party cookies. Invest in the Privacy Sandbox. You don't need to go beyond walled gardens. You don't need to go for these cookieless, idealist solutions from competitors outside of big tech. You can play within the Privacy Sandbox, and that's going to work for users and it's going to work for you as an advertiser. If they're not deprecating cookies, what good is the sandbox and what purpose is it going to serve?
Well, I think, so they have said that they're going to continue to invest.
That's the thing, yeah. They've said the sandbox is still doing something.
And so one of those is IP protection for users that use Chrome Incognito, which is the privacy browser. So I think that's one of them. I don't know if there's another one. Oh, so they've got some safe browsing, safety checked, and built-in password protections. I think they're going to continue with those sort of things. I mean, I don't know.
It's vague, isn't it?
It's vague. I mean,
they probably don't know themselves, to be honest, because a lot of this is still in flux. And you're right, it's probably prompted by the several trials going on. And until there's a bit more clarity surrounding what's going to happen there in the future, maybe this is a move from Google to just tread a bit of water.
And maybe as well, like, to just hone in on investment, keep some of that funds, because they don't know where they're going to need to invest or what's happening with the trial. And also you're forgetting that in itself is going to be costly.
Now, another, and this sums up the sentiment from the broader industry that we spoke to. And I should say that having had conversations with many people, the sentiment is it doesn't matter. First party cookies are still where the priority needs to be. You need to be investing in, or even, zero party data and completely cookieless solutions. That's the sentiment coming out of Adland. Whether that holds true, we'll have to wait and see. I'm less than certain. But Charlie Johnson, VP International at Digital Envoy, her comments, I think, are a good general reflection of all the people we spoke to. So I'll just mention a little bit of that here. She said, well, colour us not shocked, but still a bit disappointed. After years of the industry pouring time, money and brainpower into cookie-free solutions, Google's latest move feels a bit like being told the wedding's off after the cake's already been cut. Now, what's interesting about that is it points to the fact that the impending deprecation is what moved along investment in alternative solutions. Because if we were still planning on investing in first-party data and cookieless solutions, well, it wouldn't matter whether Google was going to deprecate on Chrome or not. We're going ahead with it, and this is what's happening. A few of the comments we've seen, like this one from Charlie, sort of assert that, well, the impending deprecation has prompted us to invest in these new solutions, and now we've made this investment that we didn't have to otherwise make.
Okay, so this sort of goes back to the point earlier that we were making, that the industry is slow to change, right? And we're always talking about changing and doing these things. I think the whole thing with Google saying it's going to deprecate its third-party cookies, in the nicest way was the kick up the backside that the industry needed to move the needle and change, right? Which is great. But now it's in a complete U-turn. And there's nothing there to incentivize and motivate advertisers and even ad tech platforms to build these solutions now.
So naturally there's going to be a slowdown in the urgency.
Yeah.
GDPR says hello.
But sometimes you do. If you want change, you need motivation. And because it's one of the biggest players, that motivation has subsided.
Good way to sum all of this up, Jyoti, is colour us not shocked, but still a bit disappointed. That's certainly how I feel. It's not a massive surprise, but it's a disappointing one nonetheless, because it seems a little bit of a step back.
It feels like a letdown, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, certainly. And Google, I haven't spoken to anyone there specifically on this. I would like to at some point in the coming weeks. But I know a few of the folks there, and I know that this will be something that, unbeknownst to us, we're not aware of at this current point. Something has prompted this decision. I know this wasn't something that they wanted to do, and it's not something they were planning for. This decision's been sort of thrust upon them, whether it be something going on internally or externally, as we've alluded to here with everything going on in the news. So
it'll be interesting to find out what it actually was.
We're going to do some digging and see if we can. But in the meantime, we'll let you all go and digest that conversation and this broader news. And Jyoti, thanks very much for joining me. As always, it's been a pleasure having this discussion.
Thanks, Joe.
And that concludes this episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. A big thank you to my guest this week, colleague Jyoti Rambhai, PMW's premium content editor. We tried to make it as insightful a discussion as we could, but much like you listening, there's a lot of unknowns to do with this cookie news, and we've spoken to the experts that we can, and we have a few sources that informed some of those hypotheses and contentions you heard. But more or less, beyond what was said in that discussion, looking ahead to the future, it's just going to have to be a little bit of a wait and see for what comes of cookies, what comes of Chrome, and what Google decides to do, and what Adland decides to do in the wake of this news. It'll be very interesting to see how things play out and if people's commitment to privacy and first-party data remains as steadfast as a lot of the industry have been saying. As always, a big thank you to you, the loyal listener, for tuning in each and every fortnight as you do. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast. Don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice and give us some love on social media. We're putting up clips and full episodes across YouTube, LinkedIn, and TikTok as well. So meet us there. And don't forget about Digital Disruptors, the PMW mini-series of podcasts hosted by our very own news reporter, Reem Makari. A new episode of that is coming a week from today, this episode being released. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for another episode of the Performance Marketing Unlocked podcast in a fortnight's time. That's enough from me. I'm exhausted from doing all that thinking about all those cookies all this week. As always, have an amazing week, and you'll be hearing from me again very shortly. Bye for now.